something very familiar suddenly caught Presepe's attention. With a slightly absent-minded expression, Prisippi walked slowly towards the window. Or to be precise, towards the table placed in front of the window. Mrs. Fenric had turned around, holding a black shirt, but suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Vase. It looks just like my vase. The vase in front of her was identical to the one that remained in the townhouse. The one that was placed next to her when she was locked in the tower, and she didn't know who had left her there. Fenric did not say a word, but merely looked at her while she was holding the vase. The day of their first meeting. He had never forgotten how much Precipe loved flowers. So, before she returned from the ice prison to the West Tower, he left that vase there with the flowers, hoping it would be a small solace for her. At that time, he had not met Vidar yet, and he did not know how to approach her, so this was the best he could do. And he put exactly the same vase in this hut. I used to come sometimes, when my head was heavy with worries. He wasn't lying when he said that to Presepe. He came here whenever his heart choked, whenever he felt helpless and angry at his inability to reach her. He was sitting in the worn-out chair in front of the window, not looking at the beautiful sea stretching out in front of him, but only at the vase. Unlike Presepe's vase, which he filled with flowers, his vase always remained empty, useless. But that wasn't important to him. The vase was a symbol of an hidden connection between him and Presepe, a single presence that united his world and hers, even if Presepe did not know that he was the one who gave it to her. Seeing a matching vase here is really weird. But Precipi would not have known the story behind the vase. I was a little surprised to see her, but that was all for her. From her perspective, there is no connection between whoever left the vase in the tower and Fenric. You better change your clothes first. Fenric handed her the shirt in his hand, and she nodded in agreement. There is a small room that way, you can use it. The atmosphere was a little tense from the beginning, so was it wrong for her to talk about the vase? She wondered to herself, slightly regretting her action as she headed towards the room. Fenric was left alone, looking at the empty vase on the table. He ran his hand over it silently, thinking back to all the times he'd spent here thinking about Presepe. After a short time, he heard a faint voice coming from behind him. It looks like Precipi has finished changing her clothes. How do you look? Fenric began to speak, but suddenly stopped when he saw her, and did not continue. As I expected, it couldn't possibly fit me. The height difference between you and me is huge, not to mention the physical structure. When she put on Fenric's shirt and looked at herself, she immediately understood that something was wrong. The shirt was too wide and too long. As for the extra length, it was acceptable, and also, it can be worn as a short dress instead of a shirt. Better than something too short. But the show was a disaster. Despite her attempts to close the buttons and adjust its shape, the shirt continued to hang loosely. And the sleeves? Exaggeratedly long, as if it belonged to a long-armed monkey. Simply put, she looked like a crazy person wearing a huge potato sack. Especially with her hair wet and messy from the rain, she looked even worse. But she had nothing to do with it. Her dress was all wet, and there was no use trying on other clothes if they were all Fenric's size. I guess I wasn't thinking properly, Fenric whispered, suddenly turning his gaze away from her. But stay in it for now. It will do you good while the dress dries. His voice sounded the same, calm as usual. But the slight trembling of his lips was not lost on Presepe. Sir Duke Fenric. Yes, say what you want. Just laugh, it will be less embarrassing. Me too, I look a little crazy. Fenric burst out laughing. It's better like this. Although she looked funny, the tension that had hung over them since the beach was beginning to dissipate. She felt as if something had been lifted from her heart, even if just a little. I didn't laugh because you looked crazy, but because you were cute. Those words reached the tip of his tongue, but he chose not to say them. Instead, Fenric approached her and extended his hand, beginning to roll up the very long sleeves that were hanging down from the shirt as if they would touch the floor. This way, it will be easier for you to move. Fenric gently took her delicate wrist, led her towards the fireplace, and sat her on the rug in front of it. Let me dry your hair. Oh, it's okay, it'll dry out if you leave it like this. There's nothing we can do anyway. And if it dried properly and tied up well, you wouldn't look like you described yourself a moment ago. He was right. Of course, I hope you know that I could never see you as crazy, no matter the condition of your hair. Then he took a towel that he had prepared in advance, and began drying her long strands of hair that were still completely wet. It was true that Fenric was not as skillful as the maids in the palace or as Hannah was, but his touch was tender and warm, just as he always had been with her. The light of the flame from the fireplace sparkled over Precipi's violet eyes, as she stared at him silently, taken in by his absent-mindedness. Duke, this is a story from my childhood. She finally spoke in a low voice. There was someone who handed me a little puppy and said he would come back to get it later. Although she barely regained her real name, she never forgot that story. Puppy? Yes, but he wasn't mine. I just had to take care of him for a while, and then we had to part ways. She was speaking metaphorically. She could no longer suppress what she felt, her feelings had been greatly mixed up by what Fenric had shown recently. She wanted to ask, to hear an opinion, and how she wished it would come from the person who had caused that same chaos. At first I didn't feel anything. But over time, I got used to him and I became attached to him. He was also. I don't mean, we got along perfectly. Then she added, breathing slowly, but the time we could spend together began to diminish, and in the end we had to part ways, right? When the puppy is gone, I will feel empty, and maybe he will remember me, even when he returns to his owner. If she succeeds in getting out of this game, she might go back to her original life, to being herself, not this fake version of Presepe. But the real Presepe is completely different from her, especially in her personality. Therefore, even if Fenric stays next to the original Presepe, he may remember this version, her, from time to time. What makes it worse is that I know we will never meet again. The distance between us is so great. If we become attached to each other, we will only gain pain. So, I was forcing myself not to get attached. I was convincing myself that this was what was best for everyone. She said it in a shaky voice. If you were me, Duke, what would you do? If you were me, would you cling to that puppy too? We are about to become strangers again. Nothing between us makes sense. Will his answer differ from her opinion? Is there a sane person in this world who can give another answer? She was waiting, silently. But what Fenric finally said was not something Presepe ever expected.